Okay, could I have a motion to go back into public session?
So moved.
Any objections? Back into public session. The first item on our agenda is the SPCA of Westchester, 590 North State Road, site plan amendment, continuation of the public hearing, or this is the start of it? Start. Okay. Open to the public. Okay, is the applicant here?
Yes.
Here.
Did you move to open the public hearing? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Good evening, members of the board, members of the public as well. Would you prefer that since a public hearing, should I face the audience or the board? Whichever you prefer is okay.
And the public hearing all right?
Yes.
Everybody can hear me, that's fine.
Okay, wait a minute.
Okay. Okay, good evening. My name is Wayne Specter, and I'm the attorney for the applicant, the SPCA of Westchester, Inc. And this is the beginning of a public hearing on the site plan, freshwater wetlands and steep slope approval that is required for the proposal to modernize the site of the current SPCA facility on North State Road. And I'm just going to give a really brief description of the project and my client, and then I'm going to invite the project engineer, Dan Collins, I'm sorry, from Hudson Engineering. I also want to introduce here on behalf of my client, the chairperson, Deborah Klugman is here, and the executive director, Shannon Luckhoff, is here, as well as Andrew Tung, who is on the building committee for the project. And so the SPCA has a very long history in the town of Ossining. It's been on the site since 1883, on the site that exists right now. Its property consists of approximately 3.8 acres at 590 North State Road, Briarcliff Manor, in the unincorporated area of Ossining, in the general business district. And the proposal is to replace the current mix of structures that are on the building, on the property, our property, with a consolidated building. So there's a long list of services that I can go through that the SPCA provides: shelter services, cruelty investigation, low-cost pub for the public, veterinary care. Some of them animal cruelty, transportation, rescue of animals, volunteer program, is an educational outlook as well, or outreach as well. These are all programs that serve the community, both Ossining and the greater community as well. The site the SPCA currently operates on is 166,988 square feet. The structures currently there constitute approximately 17,700 square feet of enclosed or partially enclosed space. The buildings have been in place for many, many years and are significantly outdated and in need of replacement so that the facility can provide the services in an efficient and proper manner. The most recent additions to the property were made in 1995, and as I said, the buildings that are there are in various states of disrepair. The use by the SPCA of its current use is a permitted use within the general business district according to sections 200-18A, subdivision 15, and 200-18A17 of the zoning code. With this proposal, the SPCA seeks to advance its goal of consolidating into a space-efficient, modern, centralized facility which can provide the higher standards of excellence in animal care. Its goal is to provide a sheltered environment and security for its animals and for its use, but one which will ensure the health, well-being, and adoptability of the dogs and cats under its care. The SPCA intends to continue and enhance its mission, providing a vital community service to reasonably expand its reach to help more animals, and at the same time decrease the environmental impacts on the site. The facility will provide a clean, comfortable intake and which is suitable for the age and condition of the animals, and allow the applicant to assess for disease and decrease the chance of contamination of other dogs and cats at the facility. There's going to be a new cat facility with communal areas to allow the cats to exercise out of their habitats. There's going to be space for the public to interact with both dogs and cats inside several rooms designed to allow prospective adopters to get acquainted with the animals. There's going to be increased and more appropriate isolation areas for sick animals, and areas which will allow the animals to get well quicker due to better ventilation, HVAC, etc. We're planning to reduce the current 6 scattered buildings and structures on the site to one centralized 2-story building, which will modestly increase the capacity of the facility from approximately 72 dogs and 69 cats to approximately 78 dogs and 98 cats. The new building will consist of 20,968 square feet on the first floor and 6,150 square feet on the second floor, which is going to increase the total square footage from 17,700 to approximately 27,121 feet. The new plan will provide for 67 defined parking spaces and a much clearer and improved traffic pattern on the property. Right now, the parking and traffic setup is very difficult to traverse, turnarounds, etc. It's not a modern parking structure developed over the years as buildings were added. The improved organization of the site will also allow for enhanced circulation of the parking, improve the management and reduce the environmental impacts within the property. There's going to be improved landscaping, and there will be a reduction in the incidental and occasional noise impacts by reason of moving the animals inside the shelter instead of them housing them in outside open structures. The overall footprint will be improved with decreases in environmental impacts. Currently, the property is, like I said, very old. It's been there in its current state for a very long time, and there's very limited stormwater management facilities currently on the property. With its current application, a SWIP is being submitted which will show that stormwater will be treated on-site and no untreated stormwater will leave the property. There's also going to be adequate sediment and erosion control measures proposed during construction, and all applicable regulations minimizing runoff leaving the property during construction will be adhered to. The inclusion of stormwater management measures will greatly improve the quality of stormwater either leaving the property or entering the wetlands which are on the property. It is also noted, of course, that an area of regulated wetland does exist on the property. The proposed project will improve from what is existing the ecology of the regulated wetlands within the property. Dan will explain in more greater detail those measures that are being taken. And there will be a reduction from its current use, the disturbance that provides, and there will be measures to provide protection to the regulated wetlands. This is a public hearing, and I look forward to the public making commentaries or asking questions. We are here today to describe our operation. The traffic from the property, coming to and from the property, is not anticipated to increase over its current use. The use is staying the same. The number of animals, the increase in the number of animals is not anticipated that it will increase the actual traffic onto the property. There's only so many people who are looking to adopt, or so many people who are looking to volunteer or inspect the facility. It's just going to provide a safer, more manageable property, and the ability for the SPCA to do its job, which benefits the community in a improved manner. So with that, I will turn over the meeting to Dan Collins to give a more detailed technical description of the project.
Good evening, members of the board, members of the public. Dan Collins from Hudson Engineering. As Wayne already said, we are proposing a single building. Is it even reaching that far? As you can see on this side, maybe this will work. Nope. All right.
That won't work on a screen.
No. Well, I tried. So as you can see in the center of the plan on this side, or if you want to look up there, you can as well. We're consolidating 6 buildings on site at this point right now, scattered around. There's the vet building to the front of the property, and the kennels to the center and to the southern side of the building. Right now, and as well as the office building right at the entrance to the property. What we're proposing to do is, it's kind of disjointed now. Everything's separated. Everybody's out. All the animals are still outside. It's kind of not safe for the animals, obviously. The noise is probably not that great for the neighborhood. So what they're proposing to do, again, as Wayne had already mentioned, is consolidate everything into one single building. This would have dog kennels, additional cat condos, new state-of-the-art veterinary care facilities in the center of the building, centralized check-in for guests, the second story for the administrative office space and training. The centralized areas will make it a little bit easier for everybody to come in, adopt their animals, meet with their animals, kind of walk through the facilities so they can see what animals there are to adopt and everything. Just keep it a little bit streamlined and a little centralized on the property. New outdoor dog runs are being proposed. The outdoor dog run that previously was on the north side of the property behind the, I guess that's the northwest corner of the property. There's a dog run in that area. That's going to be pulled in closer. There's a dog run in the rear of the property that's also going to be removed, and the building is going to be closed in that area. The proposed dog run, I don't know if you can see the hatched area just north of the driveway, just above the driveway. Above the parking lot, there's going to be a dog run there, separated into two little areas for small dogs and larger dogs. Just adjacent to the entrance, there's also going to be another smaller dog run for smaller puppies to play at the entrance. In the rear of the property, there's also going to be a third dog run for rehabilitation purposes. There will be some outdoor kennels. They won't be used, they'll use sporadically throughout the day. The animals will be brought in at the end of the day. Any animals that are out there during the rain events, they obviously won't be left out there in the rain. They'll be kept inside at those times. The kennels along the northern, there'll be kennels along the northern face of the building, on the northern side of the building, as well as additional kennels to the southeast of the building as well. In regards to the parking, again, right now it's a little disjointed. I think they probably have about 30 spaces. Once you enter the site, the traffic is a little bit difficult. You have to maneuver around if it's a busy day to do a three-point turn and kind of block everything up. The new parking area now consists of 67 spaces, 3 of which I believe are handicap spaces adjacent to the front of the building. The new layout is more conducive to better flowing traffic. To get in and out of the site, if there's no parking spaces on the site, they can get in and out easier. The traffic flow is a lot better than what currently exists. And access will still obviously be coming off of North State Road, and that's not going to change. In regards to site lighting, let's see if I can pull that up there. We are providing a series of lighting. We're trying to meet the minimum requirements of the town. There's not going to be any excess of light. There's just going to be enough light so that if there's anybody out there at the end of the day that needs to lock up or needs to take care of the animals, they can safely get to the parking lot, get to their cars, and vice versa if they need to get back into the building. So we are providing, it's going to be 9 new decorative light poles. They're going to be gooseneck light poles, so they'll look nice. It's not going to be any of those box poles. I have actually a second there.
Facing down.
So they'll be facing down. I believe the poles are going to be between 12 feet and 15 feet, so they're not going to be extremely high. They're not going to be above the tree lines, so you're not going to have any of the light exiting the property boundaries. It's not anticipating that there's going to be any light pollution outside of the property. There might be a little bit to the south along the edge of the self-storage, but they already have their lights on their side coming onto the SPCA property as it is right now, as it exists. There will be also some security lighting around the rear of the building, just so that people can safely walk the walkway through the rear of the back of the building if need be. Again, these are going to be set at 12 feet high. The building, the 2-foot story portion of the building is only in this area, if you can see where my mouse is. It's only in this portion. The remainder of the building is a single-story, 12-foot height building. So those lights will only be about 12 feet high, and again, they'll be behind the existing landscape berm that's there, and as well as the existing plantings on top. In regards to landscaping, where are we? Planting. There are actually 2 portions to the landscaping plan. There's actually the site landscaping, which is ornamental trees and screening, et cetera, and then there's the wetland mitigation plantings for buffer, so that wherever we're disturbing some buffer, we're trying to put something back in specific areas in order to make sure that whatever we disturb is going to be put back to where it was, or additional buffer will be added so that we can't disturb those areas. Due to the limited budget, obviously the SPCA is a non-for-profit, so they work on donations and funds raised. The landscaping plan is minimal in regard to decorative shrubs and low plantings. There will be some decorative shrubs within the landscaped islands in the parking area, as well as up against the building. There are going to be some low shrubs and grass and decorative grasses, ornamental stuff in the front. The rest of the site that's not going to be planted with trees will be lawn, maintained as lawn. As part of the landscaping, in order to shore up this existing berm, there was a berm that was actually installed as part of the development for the Stone Creek side in 1995. That was actually put in coordination with the SPCA at that time. That was done obviously to a 6-foot berm to actually provide some screening and then some plantings on top of the berm. Obviously over the years the trees have grown and they've thinned out underneath. And again, as I state, the SPCA has limited budget, so we're proposing a 6-foot high PVC privacy fence which will run along the top of that berm, and it will provide a lot of privacy from the SPCA, or additional privacy that exists now from the Stone Creek side and the SPCA. We're also providing new evergreen plantings along the northeast corner of the building, which will provide additional screening in that area where the berm bends back onto the Stone Creek property, and we can't really do much. We can't go onto the Stone Creek property to do anywhere. For the mitigation plan, that's not shown on here. This is an orange line in this area. There's an orange line in this area, and some plantings in here. So basically, for the mitigation plan, there will be plantings in this area. Let me just pull it up. I got it here. Mitigation plan. There will be plantings. This area is going to be replanted as buffer area with native plantings, native buffer. That would be native to a wetland buffer area. They're also shoring up the existing wetland area inside by providing additional plantings in this area as well, in addition to some plantings adjacent to where we're proposing our stormwater, which I'll get into next. For the stormwater design, as you already know, right now there's whatever hits the ground runs off, goes straight into the wetlands, goes straight into the mechanical river to the back. Whatever goes into the wetlands in the front ends up getting into the mechanical river as well, because the brook in the front is also tributary to the mechanical river. In the proposed design, I know it's difficult to see because there's a lot of stuff going on here, but I'll try to do my best here. But the proposed parking lot is going to flow over land. All the stormwater on this area is going to flow over land and be captured and treated via a New York State DEC organic surface filter. What that does is basically it acts as a temporary pond. It consists of about 18 inches to 2 feet of filter material at the bottom. The water comes into it, fills up to a certain point for the water quality, which is usually the first flush of the storm, or first inch or two of rain. That'll sit in there so that everything can settle out. It filters through the organic media at the bottom, gets captured with a curtain drain, and the treated water is discharged to the brook to the front. For the roof area, since this is a redevelopment application for the DEC, we are directing that through what they call a hydrodynamic separator. It basically spins the water around and separates the oil. The oil raises the top, the sediments would sink to the bottom, and then the cleaner water comes out of the end, out of the pipe. This meets with the discharge from the organic filter and discharges to the brook in the front. There was some concern from the town regarding the outdoor kennel areas. What we did do is we actually rerouted those to the front of the property. The low flows in those areas will get directed to the sewer, so anything that's high fecal coliform height that has a lot of dog, in it, it's going to be redirected to the sewer. During strong rain events, it'll bypass, enter our storm system, be treated through that system instead, and then be discharged down through the river. I believe that covers everything on our end. If there's any questions.
Just on one other point about the proposed sign, which,
Oh, yes.
I mean, we have a rendering of the building for the public to comment on, as well as colors and some description of some of the exterior of the building. The building was planned to try to be as attractive as possible with various features. But in addition, the sign that's shown on the plan, there's two different versions of it. Since it was originally pointed out that the original proposed sign exceeded the size limits in the town code, at the board's recommendation, we've submitted an application for a variance on the sign. I'm assuming, we don't have a date yet for that matter to be considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals. We hope to have it soon, but my hope is that this board should this board approve the project. It would be conditional on the approval by the zoning board. If the zoning board does not approve it, we'd have to obviously go with the smaller sign. So that would be the proposal. Okay.
If there's anybody who has any questions, board.
Okay. Does the staff have any comments at this time?
We do have a review memo that we could go over. I think we each have a copy. So why don't we start on page 3. And this has to do with the tree replacement. So the diameter of trees proposed to be removed is 495 inches. So the required tree replacement for that is 247.5 caliper inches. And the applicant intends to plant approximately 183 caliper inches and proposes to pay the equivalent amount of money relative to the deficit of 64.5 caliper inches into the town tree bank fund.
Has there been any movement on town tree bank fund?
Not
Okay.
a lot.
Okay.
Item number 2, the 6-foot-high privacy fence was mentioned along the northerly property line. I think that should be extended a bit farther back toward the rear property line, and the location and size of the white pines at the top of the berm should be shown on the drawings. Item number 3, there are 4 notes that should go on the lighting plan, and the illumination contours on the lighting plan should bear.
Yeah, they had. I noticed that after it was submitted, everything's too small. So they're there, but
Are they?
yeah, barely.
Oh, okay. So either make them larger
Yeah.
or provide me with a magnifying glass. And the last item is just a placeholder. Wayne was talking about going to the ZBA for a variance with respect to the. Oh, that's not the last thing. The next thing is the variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals with respect to the signage. And last but not least, the EAF should be signed and dated. And everything else that we had in previous memos has been taken care of.
Dan, do you have comments?
Yes, I provided the board with a review memo as well. So we had both the revised plans and stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWIP. We wanted to fully understand I'll just go through. Comment 1, provide a profile of the sanitary sewer improvements. The second comment was revise the drainage profile on sheet C8 to show utility crossings. Comment 3, provide a profile for the northern drainage system. Comment 4, concerns regarding coliform contaminated runoff from outdoor kennels entering adjacent waterways were discussed with the applicant's engineer. Runoff from the outdoor dog runs is proposed to be collected with curtain drains and connected to the sanitary sewer. All piping for this system should be solid, and the system designed to eliminate groundwater infiltration into the sewer system. Calculations for the sizing of the low-flow orifice should be provided. We do have those calculations in the SWIP, but there's, I think, some adjustments we're going to want to make to that to optimize the system. But otherwise, the fundamental issue on this was to not have cleanup runoff from the dog runs being introduced into the stormwater system, but instead going into the sanitary system. Moving on to item 5, verify the configuration of the water supply with the village water department. And finally, comment 6, provide additional existing contour labels to clarify topography.
Has the applicant had a chance to consider these comments from the staff?
Well, we just received it tonight, but in discussing, we don't really see any issues.
No, they're all straightforward, everything's straightforward, it will be addressed.
Okay. At this time, are there any members of the public interested in this matter who wish to speak? Seeing none, okay.
I'll speak if
oh.
you.
Oh, Don, go ahead.
Yeah, I just go from here, I'm gonna.
Of course, it's not gonna work after I take it.
So I went to the building department and just saw the plant list.
Name and
What?
address. Name and address.
Donna Sharrett, 84 Morningside Drive. I assume that hasn't changed, the plant list that I saw it last week. Sandy, is that the correct updated one? The plant list
Yes.
that I saw in the building department? So I just have some suggestions. The hemlock will not survive because of, in this area due to insects. So perhaps you can make another choice. American holly would be great. I could give you other suggestions. Also, the American elm, unless it's the cultivar Valley Forge, or if there's another one, I don't know of it, but American elm will also not survive because of Dutch elm disease. And the viburnum, again, is attacked by beetles, and so that should probably be replaced. I'd be happy to give you suggestions if you needed, or whatever. So the other thing is, as I was curious, there's a lot of invasive species in the existing mature trees in the front and the back of the property, so I didn't know if there was a plan to address that, because and I even thought that if that was part of the plan, that maybe the planning board would consider that in lieu of the other trees, the 64-inch diameter that has to be replaced, and because the goal of the tree code, and I think the goal of the town, is to protect a tree canopy. So if you're protecting the ones that you're keeping by taking the vines off, I think that would be very valuable to the town. So maybe that could be an exchange if they remove vines, so to protect the trees that exist by the two waterways, and one in the front, one in the back. They're very, there's a lot of invasive brambles and vines. So that would be my suggestion. I hope that you would do that. And the other thing is, I saw that you had a lot of oaks, and the trees, which are great native trees, but post-construction soil will not support those trees. So the soil needs to be greatly amended. And again, since it's such a beloved institute, maybe I don't know if they would go for this, but maybe the town could donate leaf compost, because there's a lot of it. So that would be my suggestion, to see if they would do that and incorporate that in the top 18 inches, which is the root zone of the trees. Because they won't, particularly oaks, will not grow in that post-construction dead soil. So that's it.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh, okay.
Hi, my name is Angela Adaminelli, and I am a resident of the Stone Creek HOA townhouses. And we're kind of curious to know when the construction of this will begin, and how long do you anticipate it going on?
I don't think I can give you a direct answer right now, because there's a lot of moving pieces to get construction going. There's still a lot of plans that have to be completed. drawings that have to be completed, building permits have to be obtained. There's fundraising has to be completed as well, but it's been so far very successful. So, you know, I don't know if Shannon, you have any, you can add to the timing in terms of having all the funds in place to start construction, but
I think we were thinking perhaps it would be sometime this summer, but as Wayne mentioned, there are a lot of moving pieces, and we still have to sort of secure the last of our funding. But we would hope, I don't think it would be any sooner than this summer.
Okay, okay, that's
What
fine.
about the effect while you're doing the work, the effect on the parking and everything? Because at this point, people do come and park on our private property.
Well, that was where I was gonna go next,
And
which
they will
is that,
well, during the construction, actually, the facility will not be operating.
right, okay.
So the animals are going to be moved to another facility and then brought back when the facility is ready again. So you're not going to have that traffic.
Okay,
As far as construction traffic, I don't believe we anticipate any of the trucks using anything other than the property itself.
okay, so, because that was another issue that we had been discussing. And so all building materials will basically be brought in via the entrance to the shelter. Is that correct? None
That is
will
correct.
go across our property?
No, we don't need, they don't need to use your property as a staging area.
Okay,
They
okay.
also still, at this point, maybe when it's changed, they still walk the
Ma'am,
dogs.
one person at a time.
Okay, about walking the dogs on the property and, you say, yeah,
I just,
the
Yes.
fence, yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. We're new at this game. Okay, so, what about the fence?
You mentioned a 6-foot high
We have your
privacy.
name and
Lorraine
address.
Bullis, I live at Stone Creek as well. You mentioned a 6-foot high privacy fence. What would it look like?
It's the standard, I think it's gonna be gray, the standard fence that you see, the standard 6-foot high privacy fence. It's
Made out of wood?
PVC.
PVC.
It's a PVC fence. So it'll be a solid fence, so you won't be able to see through it. So it'll be basically, it'll be on the SPCA property. It'll be on the SPCA side of the property, obviously. It'll run behind the white pines that are on there existing right now. So it'll be hidden with the landscaping that's on your side a little bit.
And then
But it'll provide
SPCA
additional.
would be taking maintenance of the fence?
That's
On the
correct.
fence, yes, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
Hi, Jeff Carpenter, 11 Stone Creek Lane. The lighting, would that lighting be on all night in the parking lot?
I don't think it's required to be on all night. David, is that something that needs to be required, that the lighting be on all night, or is it?
No,
No.
just the opposite.
So
No,
just-
I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, no, if there's,
There would be a time where there would be no lighting.
yes, there would be. Yeah, if the town requires that it not be on all night.
Correct.
So there will
So
be
what
time.
would, they would have to be off by when, and they would be allowed on by when? Do you happen to know?
I think it's generally after business hours are over and not again until morning.
Okay.
Okay.
The sign, the proposed sign on the face, is that lit, or that's just,
There will be some lighting on it.
and that also gets turned off?
I believe so, everything that has to do with lighting will be turned off, I guess.
Are there more dog runs proposed now than are there more proposed than there are now?
There are, well, I mean, technically, the amount, yes, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 1, 2, 3 proposed now. Existing, there's 2, but the 2 that are existing now are larger. So the one that's to the north of the parking lot is gonna be about the same size of what exists in that area now, except it's gonna be pushed basically onto the footprint of where the existing building is in that area. And then the one in the rear yard that's closer to your development is actually gonna be removed because that's where building's gonna be on top of that, in that area. So the other one's gonna be actually farther to the back of the property, and then there will be a small, I guess it's more like when you go to a pet store and you see the puppies run around, that's gonna be what's in the front. So that's gonna be a small one just for the puppies in the front.
Where the south side of Stone Creek and the north side of the ASPCA meet, right in that area, it's like a small soccer field where all the kids play when the weather's good. What safety measures are you guys putting in place, if any, to prevent the dogs from potentially going into where the kids are playing?
Around all the kennels, there's gonna be 8-foot-high fencing.
Okay.
Around all the, I believe that 8-foot-high fencing continues around all the dog runs, so that no dogs can get out.
Okay.
Obviously, between, when they're walking in between the dog runs and the kennels and the building, everything, all the animals will be leashed or required to be leashed.
Okay. Is the ASPCA opposed to putting the Stone Creek HOA on their insurance policy as an additionally insured?
I'm not sure what purpose that would, because we're not going onto your property, we're not
Okay.
using your property. So from a legal standpoint, I don't believe there's an insurable interest that you could do it for.
Even though we're the only residential complex surrounding you? Again, I'm just curious, I don't know the legalities of it either, I'm just thinking ahead.
Again, I don't believe that there's an insurable matter there that can be. I mean,
Fair enough.
The organization has full coverage for all its activities, which covers its property, any activities that emanate from its property.
Again,
But they can't insure anything that happens on your property because there's no intention to use your property.
Right.
However, with that being said, the dogs are walked on our property for exercise. And the dogs need exercise, there's no problem with that. But I'm just thinking ahead for a potential issue, that's all.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
very sorry for that. They should not be walked on your property. Our volunteers, our staff have strict, regulations not to walk them on your property. So maybe we can talk after and find out.
Yeah, just, again, just,
and what
we're
time it
conversing
is,
and
we'll-
it used to be a lot more.
Okay.
To where that was like the normal route for the dog exercise.
Really?
And listen, everybody needs exercise, dogs, they need exercise too. I'm just trying to prevent a problem,
Of course,
that's all.
and they definitely should not be walked on your property. So again, I apologize for that. We will get on top of that.
Thank you.
And in the meantime, my name is Beth Cluen, also from Stone Creek, and they also park your volunteers and people coming to look at the dogs. They block our driveway getting into our developments that's on that side.
Well, the good news is with the additional parking spots,
But
hopefully
that
will
won't
not
be
be
a problem.
necessary.
Well, hopefully they'll know, because if there's
People
still
are
an
not-
overflow.
The public is not instructed to park on your property, so if people are doing it, it's not without consent. But the additional parking spaces and the better parking flow within the property should hopefully prevent that from happening in the future.
Just one final question, if you may. Years and years ago, there was an incinerator on the property. There's no intentions of having anything like that come back, correct?
No, that's been dismantled. It's
Thank
been
you.
removed.
Okay.
It's not the mission, it's not their mission.
And you'll have separate buildings.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Questions? Show of hands? No? Any comments from the board?
Hi, I have a couple of questions and maybe some comments along the way. So there are wetlands on both sides of the proposed building areas. And while it occurs to me that after reviewing your plan, as I have, that what you propose is going to be a lot better than what is there now in terms of potential runoff of pet waste and so forth. I guess I'm caught. I'm a little stuck because normally I would like to get the opinion of our wetland consultant to take a look at your plan, even though to me it looks better. But I'm sensitive to the fact that you're a nonprofit. So I'm not sure what to ask there. But it occurs to me that if it's not expensive to have our consultant take a quick look, it might, just to get another pair of eyes on it, I wouldn't mind doing that if it could be done without unduly burdening the applicant. Sandy, I have a question. How much does it typically cost to get the services of Steve Coleman, for instance? Is it like
really say. It depends on the application.
Right. Do you have a sense of what's a minimum, or is it, does he have an hourly rate? How does that work?
I can't really,
Okay. All right.
I mean, I would
So-
have to look at other
Yeah.
cases.
I mean, I confess that I have a pretty high confidence in your plan, given what I've seen and given the fact that, you know, you've got Tiffany Tung on board and their environmental consulting firm. So I'm not going to demand that consultant, but it occurred to me. One other note regarding the wetlands. Can you tell me definitively that on either side of the small stream that's the tributary to the Tacanico, or the Tacanico itself, which is on the other side, are you putting in any new culverts through which either of those waterways will go?
No, the only thing we're doing is we're putting our discharge from our treated stormwater to the brook in the front, and it'll be daylighting before you get to the brook.
Okay.
So we're not actually putting culverts, we're not, that's why, one of the reasons why we didn't touch the driveway in the front, because we didn't want to get involved with anything that had to do with the stuff in the front yard and the wetlands and the water course. It's the other reason why we're trying to reuse the existing sewer surface that goes out to the street, so we're putting a doghouse on top of that, so we don't have to dig up anything that we don't need to. The rear, the mechanical river to the rear, we've pulled the limited disturbance closer in, and then we're redirecting a lot of those kennels in the backyard that would have previously, in our previously proposed design, flowed over land to the mechanical. We're taking that away. And that was, obviously, that was discussed with Dan, because we were concerned that that would be an issue.
Right.
Discharging those areas over land.
So, no plans for any new culverts?
Nope.
And what about repairs or modifications to existing culverts?
Haven't really looked into that. There's not, what is it, there's the culvert that just goes underneath our bridge that seems to be in good condition. And then there's the culvert along the north side, but that would be onto, underneath Stone Creek, their main roadway. So we wouldn't be able to access that to do any modifications. And then obviously the mechanical river in the rear, there's no culverts there that exist, so we wouldn't be doing anything there either.
Okay. And on the, I took a look around the property, you know, just what I could, you know, basically for my car. And on the Stone Creek property, I noticed that, and it was brought to my attention, that the culvert that goes under the road and their entranceway is badly perched on the downstream side of it. So there's, you know, about a foot of a waterfall, which prevents fish passage. So that is not compliant with town of Austining requirements currently.
Is that
But
in the town
that's
of
not on
Austining?
your property, that's on their property.
I think it might be across the town border too, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, could it
Stone
be?
Creek, I believe, is
They're
in
in
Newcastle.
They're in Newcastle.
Okay, so anyway, my concern is anything that you would be doing on your property that would impair fish passage in any way.
No, nothing.
Okay, and if, as you're going about the construction, you find that you do have to repair perhaps your bridge, you know, your entryway, do you commit to doing it in a way that is passable by fish?
Of course, yeah, no, we
okay.
would
Okay.
do it we do take care of it in an environmental way,
Okay,
environmentally friendly.
very good, because it's not state required, so
Yeah.
I want to push on.
Because that's not something that you don't want to, if we do get into that, we wouldn't want to disturb any more than we have to just to do the job.
Okay. Another thing is that it occurs to me that since you mentioned that the plantings, or the planting plan is somewhat minimal because of the cost of doing that, you or your applicant or your client might be interested in taking advantage of our brand-new and not really well-defined tree bank plan right now. There are other projects going on in town where they have not been able to meet the requirement for replantings, and so perhaps you could take advantage of that. And
Yeah, I wasn't
either
aware that-
use-
I
Yeah,
didn't-
either
wasn't aware
use,
that-
yeah, either pay for some of yours that way. I don't think that was
Well-
completely specify it, was it? That it couldn't
I
be
can-
used for another private property?
I don't believe so.
I think it's town.
Okay, so I thought that might be good, but
Or
if it's
town
not,
designated.
it's not possible.
Well, theoretically, I guess the town could make it a little bit more clear on what exactly would be sufficient for the tank. But we'll leave that up to the town.
Given
to
that it's a
figure it out.
nonprofit, then it might be able to, so,
Well, we'd need more clarification from the town board, but it's an idea, definitely an idea.
so we should try to pursue that. One last comment, if I may. Last meeting, I asked if you could look into the possibility of using, installing solar on your roofs or structuring your roof such that it could accommodate a future solar. And you said you'd look into it.
That was, yeah, I'd have to talk to the architect. I think he was going to look into something there. I haven't had any discussions with him about it, so I'd have to follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Andrew Ton, I just wanted to speak to Mr. Helms' suggestion on the reallocation of the tree bank money. In another community, actually that Steve Coleman represents, they've now considered where, in a similar situation where there were too many trees to be replaced, that some of the tree requirement could be satisfied by shrub and ground cover plantings. In that way, the revegetation of a site is furthered, and it's not that the bank money just goes into an unknown location, but it's in that particular area. So if the town board hasn't fully figured out how to do that, one option might be that you could get certain credits for doing lower plantings as well as trees. So 5 shrubs for a tree or something like that. And that would give the planning board or whatever agency was administering that a little bit more flexibility in crafting a solution to a particular situation.
I think the town board would have to amend the,
They might,
Chapter.
but that might be something to think about, because
Yes. Sure.
if you have that surplus and you don't have a place to put it, this would be a place to put that funds.
yeah, right, thanks.
Thank you, Andy.
Any other comments from the board?
Can I make one more comment?
Sure, John.
Okay, sorry. I just had a question. You did, it went by really quick and then it settled later. That you're putting grass in, like a lawn?
Be lawn, yeah.
So considering that so much water is gonna be diverted to the brook, would they commit to doing chemical-free lawns? Because that would be really
Yes.
fabulous for the animals
Sure.
also.
Yeah, yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That's important. I agree.
Okay, what next needs to be done on this?
We're going to adjourn the public hearing to a date certain.
Okay. Any other comments from the public at this time? Okay, seeing none. Do we need a motion on that adjournment?
You should.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn the public hearing to
Allow for them to respond to the comments
yes.
and submit.
How long
make
do
a-
you think we need?
on
When's our next deadline?
February 6th.
February 6th.
Is
Is
the
Is the deadline or the meeting?
Is the meeting, the deadline?
Meeting,
The deadline would be,
the Monday before, to, 28th, January 28th.
I think I can get all that done by the 20th.
Okay, so we would have the date certain of February 6th. So the motion is for adjournment until February 6th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any objections? Nope, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is
Yes.
Mark Petrucci, my apologies. 51A Crone Dam Road, new single-family home, architectural review. Is the applicant present here?
Yes.
Right.
Good evening to all.
Here's some renderings, I think that were requested by the town. I believe you have also some copies in front of you there, showing the property. Are there, I mean, it's just, you know, we have a rendering here showing some of the landscape and the color, the actual siding itself and the color, and the roofing material and the trim color.
Any comments from the board at this time? No? Any comments from the staff?
We haven't reviewed it yet.
This is the existing lot here.
Wait for the presentation.
Okay.
I have a question. So you show here this Trex Enhance, which is a solid product, right?
Right.
But am I seeing a
You really-
vinyl siding?
Yeah, but that Trek material is a decking material.
Oh,
That's gonna
okay.
be, it's
I
underneath
thought
a
it's
covered
siding.
porch.
Okay. So it's just plain vinyl siding for the house?
Right.
Any other questions from the board at this time? Any members of the public interested in this matter right now? Seeing none? Okay, so basically have time for the staff to review this matter?
For the next meeting.
For the next meeting, okay. What else? Do you need a resolution on that?
No.
Okay.
Should we set a public hearing for the next?
Do we?
We haven't,
Oh, so you don't.
it's hard to know where we stand without
Right.
looking at.
We need to finalize more of the.
I need to look at it first, I think.
Okay, so the applicant, do you have a timeframe you want to?
Well, yeah, it would've been great if we, I don't know what else is involved now. Is there a public meeting that absolutely has to take place, or?
There'll be a public hearing, sure.
And we'll,
So at the next meeting, you'll get review memos from me and from Dan, and we'll see where things stand, and then perhaps schedule a public hearing for the next meeting.
so February 6th, we could be back here for the
For-
public.
Yes, for going over the review memos and possibly setting a public hearing.
All right. Yeah, okay. No sooner to kick it up and to get to the public hearing for the next.
Well, you could work out
I-
the issues right away, but it depends on when the staff can complete the review.
Can't really give an opinion on whether it's ready for a public hearing without reviewing it.
There's 2 meetings in February, so
Mhm.
you could get on maybe the second one, right? There
Sure.
may be time to get on the second February
Yeah.
meeting, so you
Okay.
don't lose the whole month.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Artist Senior Living, 553 North State Road, amendment to approved site plan.
Sandy, you want me to use the mouse? Do you mind if I use the mouse
sure.
to do the driving?
I just wanted to make sure that, oh, okay, yeah, these are the new ones. This is on the internet, this is not on.
Oh,
Unless you want to put the
I do have a...
CD in, I can put that in. That would be. Oh, great, okay. Good way.
Good evening. My name is Brian Hildenbrand from Keller Sessions Consulting. And here with me tonight is Mike Terwilliger from Artist Senior Living, as well as Mr. Preston Briggs from Whiting Turner. They are the construction managers for the project. If you've been by the site, you'll see that it's well underway. We broke ground in September. As far as site improvements go, the foundations are in. The site is graded. Some of the utilities are installed, including the stormwater infiltration system for the parking lot, and work is ongoing daily. So I was there last week. I'm sure there's been progress since, and if you've been by, you can certainly see the progress. We were here tonight, as in most construction projects, things that go on paper and that easy for me to draw and present turn out to be a little more difficult to build in the field when you deal with soil and concrete and other site constraints. We have a few different changes that we were requesting be made to the site plan. So in no particular order, I'll run through them. The first were some changes to the sidewalks in front of the building. The previous plan had a sidewalk connection across the front on both sides. Now we are connecting right to the parking lot. And that is due to meeting the ADA slope requirements for sidewalks. And with the buildings, can't be moved now, and the road can't be moved, so we had to, in order to make the site work, it was decided that having sidewalks directly in front of the building wouldn't be used enough to justify them. So now we have access to the parking lot through drop ramps here. Also, it was, in order to make the grading, again, ADA requirements for the accessible parking spaces in front, the ADA spaces were shifted over to the right side. Again, that is to achieve a 2% maximum pitch. In doing so, we were able to reduce the drop-off apron, still keeping it symmetrical to the entrance, and add an additional parking space. The apron is still 20 feet, so it still functioned as intended. It was just a benefit of an added space. Okay, moving on. It was requested previously or approved to have a solid fence around the entire courtyard system. The request now is to replace this rear section of fence with a metal fencing that is composed of black spindles, so it's an open style fence. This came about since we got our approval. Artist has constructed and they are up and running in a few different locations, and they have this fence in other areas. So just by getting some feedback from what works for them, it was determined that having this style of fence would create a more open sense for the residents in the back using the courtyard. And what this plan doesn't show is this is our wetland mitigation plan, which was heavily discussed during the approval process. I just want to make clear that the fence isn't along the property line. It was a minimum of 20 feet. It's actually 22 plus feet off the property line. Beyond the fence is this very intensive planting for mitigation, consisting of a mix of deciduous evergreen trees, minimum of 7 feet tall from day one, and also shrubs. Most are a minimum of 30 inches on the day of the install. So so what that will do, having this fence, also allows the residents to enjoy you know, this lush planting that we've worked hard to come up with this design. As far as impacts, I know there was, you know, we went from a solid fence to an open fence. We looked at what would be the impacts to the neighbors. The fence is roughly 200 feet plus or minus from what I could tell from GIS to the neighbor to the rear, about 20 feet difference in elevation. They are above us. That fence was never to be a barrier for, I'm sure, I heard site lighting might have been an issue, or light now impacting the neighbor. I just want to emphasize that, again, this is not an institution where there's nighttime activities. These are residents that do not go outside beyond dusk. The lighting was for downlighting for the walking paths. It's not, there's no floodlights or spotlights. So, again, in our lighting scenarios, our model was done not contemplating any fence, so it was the worst case, never using that solid fence as a break for any lighting spillover. And lastly, is the open channel. And I know this was heavily discussed over the year plus of the approval process. During construction, once this site was cleared of vegetation and work began, throughout construction, the contractor started to lay out where the channel would go, just to get an idea how this would work. And it was determined that some of the survey information wasn't as defined as we needed. So we had another surveyor go out and really take a lot of spot shots in this area to really determine how it would work in the field. By doing so, it became apparent that the channel would be much deeper than anticipated, and more so, it would impact the neighbor's property. This is the back corner. So you can see there's an existing retaining wall. This is where the channel was supposed to begin. The water course enters our property in this area near the orange fence. In order to construct the channel, we would have to dig footings, concrete footings, and they would be interacting with this retaining wall. And this retaining wall down on our property, there's no real way to analyze it or impact it. We could, if it was on our property, we could stabilize it and own it, but in order to excavate such a large excavation, it could compromise the integrity of that wall. This is a zoomed out version. You can see this wall here continues. That's the water course in question. And okay, you can see the construction ongoing, the existing patio. The original approval was to have a head wall right where these orange lines end. It was requested, we went to the building department to discuss this with the building inspector, and he voiced the same opinion about constructing this channel would negatively impact the neighbor's property. So rather than do the channel, we are requesting to do move the head wall up to the corner of the property and use a pipe system, a conventional pipe system. And I remember vividly discussions of using the channel to preserve aquatic wildlife. We still don't have the sumps in our manholes, and there's also, as to the greatest extent practical, we want to make a little plunge pool area near the entrance of the head wall So the invert of the pipe is slightly raised, just to kind of stop any low flow and give any fish that might enter or any other aquatic species a chance to escape or just have a place of refuge before entering the pipe system. Again, this was brought on by our request to the building inspector, and I can say that I believe he supports this method of collecting this water course. So I know it was a hot topic, so I'm open to input from the board.
Any comments from the board? This time?
Yeah, hi. So it'll come as no surprise that I'm disappointed. It was a matter that we discussed at length, and considering that you are building over a very substantial portion of the buffer, you were given the permission to do that essentially on the basis of mitigating some some of the past and new with your construction impacts to the stream, to the waterway. So I just want to make sure that I understand that this magenta line is the boundary of the waterway border, is that correct?
The buffer,
The
that is
buffer,
the
right.
100-foot buffer.
So at least 1/3 and approaching 1/2 of your property and building is over the buffer, which by all rights should have no construction at all. So we gave you a huge dispensation in building this at all. And now you are backing out of the only mitigation, the only significant mitigation that you agreed to. And it's only a matter of money. You could easily, well, easily is perhaps the wrong word, you could hypothetically stabilize the wall by pouring a concrete, a reinforced concrete wall sistered up to that block wall. That's doable and that would be stable. It's just a matter of money. So I am disappointed with that, very disappointed with that. I will, however, defer to John Hamilton on that matter.
And just for a point of clarification, I mean, again, this is our mitigation plan, not the channel. To say that was, we didn't do a significant mitigation, I don't think is a fair statement.
I think the plantings are fine. It was a much smaller endeavor than the channel, than opening the channel that you agreed to. That was part of the mitigation.
Believe me, and we have, it was in the budget, you know, we bid the job to create it. It's a real life scenario that when we go to construct it.
True, but you guys are not amateurs. Did you walk next to the wall? And you should have been able to anticipate that. Honestly. And now you're coming back, I can't help but think, you're thinking, you know, strategically, oh, down the way, yeah, we'll get our approvals now, and down the line, we'll point out how difficult this is, and we'll get out of it. I mean, I see that kind of thing a lot with our applicants. So it's not an unusual strategy.
Okay, well, for the record, that is not true. You can go over the survey information if you'd like, about the discrepancies in that I, as the engineer, designed too. So it is, and it's to say that we can potentially impact something we don't own
Well, I'm suggesting that you could do that construction without impacting the neighboring property by pouring a reinforced concrete wall cistern right up next to it. And do you agree that that could be done? I mean, hypothetically.
Hypothetical.
I'm not asking you to get on record saying you could do it. I'm saying, hypothetically, can that be done?
If that wall, the existing wall was stable, and yes, that is done to stabilize deep foundations.
You could underpin that wall if you had to, right? Could be done.
I would have to see what, I don't know, the condition of their property. I can't dabble into I can't undermine their footings and to benefit something on my property. I would never design that. So I guess, no, I wouldn't
With
design
their
it.
permission, if you needed to underpin their wall, and you received their permission, then it would be a matter of just
Sure, in the hypothetical,
engineering, right?
yes, that could be engineered. Again, this is,
Well, again, I'm surprised you didn't anticipate it, but again, I completely defer to John Hamilton on the matter. That's all I'll say about it. I'm disappointed.
Had there been any attempt to discuss this with the neighbor?
not to my knowledge. I know I haven't. Because we were focused on our building and our final product. So, and to inherit any of his existing walls is not something we would pursue.
I understand that with inspector and as far as our engineer as well, is satisfied with the alternative solutions you presented here. Are there any other alternatives that you might consider that would achieve at least partially the original commitment that your client made?
I guess it's tough to do that because of where the water course comes onto our property. It's right against that existing wall. So, we would have to be well into our property, encroaching onto our usable space to dig this. And, if we come into this bank, that grade it comes down to the water course. So right off the bat, we're 6 feet deep, finished depth. Never mind the excavation of the footings. For the sake, for a certain length of channel, I wouldn't. It has the same impacts because the deeper we go, the wider the excavation, the closer to the existing wall we get, and now we're dealing with our building. So I wouldn't to shift the channel anywhere else. I don't think is feasible.
Any other comments from the board?
I have another comment. So, moving on to the fence. So, if I recall, having a solid fence specified was to provide some privacy from the neighbor, from the neighbors. I understand that your point about it being an open fence being more attractive to the residents, the planned residents. But it's exactly symmetric on the negative side to the neighbors. And I'm wondering if there is another way that you could accomplish both. Perhaps replace the fence where you're describing it as you describe it with an open fence, but if some of the neighbors, and there's 3 neighbors that are affected, would want it, and we would have to ask them, would a second fence farther in be possible? That would be solid. That way your residents would have the benefit of beautiful plantings that you plan, but the neighbors would not be burdened with having to see more of the activities. So
I understand.
So if I understand you, this is the fence we're talking about, is that
Yes.
correct? So if that were open, but if there were another solid fence along
That's
the...
6 feet lower.
It is 6 feet lower, so it would
Yes.
have to be perhaps a
Very
very large
same
wall.
height as the fence you're talking about.
Right, so a solid fence here would have to be at the final height of this one, but since the property goes down because you filled 6 feet, this fence would have to be 12 feet high. Is that something that neighbors might like? I don't know, if neighbors who are here might, who would opine?
How would that? Well, I'm saying, what actually changed between?
If I may add to that, this is Mike Terwilliger with Artis Senior Living. In answer to your question, yes, we would make that outer fence solid if that were desired. I doubt that it would be desirable. I would think that would be less attractive from your side, from your house. It would block your view of the plantings areas. But in answer to your question, yes. But I'm not sure it would be that attractive.
Yeah, because now you'd rather have a 15-foot high solid fence that's, I don't.
So, you make a good point. It might not be attractive, and it might block a lot of light. It might not be a desirable solution. If that's the case, then you're not all offering a viable mitigation to, a problem that you're creating by asking for the change.
I'm just, without getting into too much, I don't know what the word is. So they took these pictures, these were not submitted. These were taken last week.
We use our whole property, we don't just use the house.
You also mentioned,
Okay.
What are you trying to show right now?
I'm showing a real life perspective from our proposed courtyard.
I'd be willing to send a photo from our side.
Just
Okay.
wait. Yeah,
So,
let
we
the
are-
applicant finish.
Okay, so again, we are installing a fence, we are above the property line. So, again, a view, if you're down below and you're looking at something above you, yes, it'll be screened. The intent, I understand they use a whole property, but when you're 20 or so feet above, whether it's solid or our open fence, again, to picture this area, this courtyard, if I can draw your attention to the board up here, is also very heavily planted with trees. So between my vantage point from this picture, there'll be trees, then our fence, then the wetland mitigation plants. This is the off-leaf time of year. This is, in my opinion, the worst case scenario as far as view sheds go. I'm struggling to see the major negative impact of having a fence relatively where this edge of the tire track is, as opposed, this is the closest, this is the western patio, I'm standing on it, it's built, this is it, this is the view. Again, the courtyard and the other patio.
It's really different from our side.
So, we have to think about our residents. These aren't patients. These are residents that will live there. We are proposing this to benefit them and not to negatively impact anyone. So we're here to discuss that. And
Question.
Sure.
Okay, so the green fencing that's there now, that's your construction fencing?
Yes.
Okay. And is that running right along the property line, or is that set in a little bit, or?
It's right on the property line.
It's on the line.
It's about a foot in from the property.
It's right on the
Okay.
property line.
And how
No
high
slope.
is what's there? How high is that?
6 feet, Preston? Say it's a 6 foot high fence.
It's right on the line.
Okay. No, I'm just trying to get perspective.
So our proposed fence would be 20 feet closer or 19 feet closer towards the building
Right.
and higher up.
And okay, so when you say higher, the
In
property
elevation.
slopes up
Because our
from there?
property slopes down towards the neighbor's property
Yeah,
where that
okay.
where that
Okay.
green fence is.
Okay, so, but the fence that's proposed now, you say your property slopes down, is where that fence is now like the lowest point? Is that, in other words, is that, there's like a little gully in there kind of thing, or a valley?
It drops a little further, but that's, yeah, it drops until it gets on to where the water course is.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
and it comes up towards our property.
Gotcha.
Our fence is on the top of that ridge,
Okay.
of that plateau.
Okay. Right. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a feel for the.
Does that look like that from your property? No, not from mine either.
Okay. Any other comments from the board or questions from the board before we ask the public for their comment? Any members of the public wish to speak on this matter?
Do you want to speak first? Go ahead. Okay, so, Donna Sharity from Morningside Drive, we were told over and over again that it was gonna be a solid fence.
Use the mic.
It was gonna be a solid fence, so this is, I don't have to get out here. It was, we were repeatedly, often told, we kept asking, and they were assured that it was gonna be a solid fence. That was part of this thing. Those pictures do not look like, you're welcome to come to my house and see what it looks like on my side. It's a 6-foot fence that on their side, they have a 6-foot slope from the fence. So when I'm standing at my fence, I can see the top of their slope. So that's where that fence is gonna start. So if it's now it sort of looks like a cage in the zoo, these little things coming down, I'm gonna be looking right at everything going on in that, my house might be 200 feet away, but I have a vegetable garden,
We use all that
we use
property.
our whole yard, and you can ask anybody, any of the neighbors, I mean, I'm out there all the time. I don't just stay in the house. And we were told a solid fence, I don't wanna look at, basically, you built on too small a property. That was the problem from the start. Most of the other places that are exactly this building are larger properties, and you would have been able to have landscaping in your residential area. What you're not seeing also from those photos that you showed is that there's a big area that's the court area in the middle, but the end sides, that's, I think, 39 feet or 35 feet or something from my property line. And that fence, if you look on the other side of the fence, you'll see the red survey tape is right next to the fence. The only place that's not is around the tulip tree, which is probably gonna have to be removed because so many big trucks have crushed the roots. But in any case, I want that addressed. I also want the runoff from the slope to stop. And that was assured to me. I was told not one drop of water would come down the slope, as if it was not directed from, as if gravity didn't affect the slope. And I'm getting runoff now, and I want that addressed. So I would like that addressed. Because a slope without any place to stop, the water comes down to the stream and the wetland. So I want the solid fence. It's not right to change it at this place. I don't understand why I would have been told solid fence, solid fence, solid fence, and now midstream it's being changed. So that's it.
My name is Ken Camber, I'm Donna's wife, I live in
Your
84
husband?
I live at 84 Morningside Drive. I guess a couple of comments. One is that I totally agree with Donna saying about the fence. That we had an agreement, right? We went through quite a process. This was a 3-year process going through this site review. To Garrett's point about the stream, there must have been 6 months of conversation about it. And if you're saying that the survey was not adequate, whose fault is that? I mean, who's culpable for not getting accurate information before spending, this type of project and being certain that you know exactly what you're doing, right? As far as the fence goes, that was also agreed upon. And you knew exactly what you were looking to do at that point in time. And
and to, I'm not meaning to, I can't put what's in your head, I don't know what's in your mindset, but you definitely agreed that, you came before a plan, you even designed it, and it was agreed upon with the board, and to come back at a later point in time and say, what, I just realized that, if solid fence is not right and it's an open fence, that's not like brain surgery, it's like there's not a lick have been planted in the area. So you still know then, as you do know now, what it was going to look like, right? And from our perspective, on our property, we use our entire property. So to assume that we live in our house and we don't use our yard is just an incorrect assumption, right? So, as far as I'm concerned, I own up to a property line, and that is fair game for me to use my property. And as Donna suggests, that was now an open property, and we just lost our privacy, which was probably half the conversation when you were going through the planning site review. And Carolyn wasn't on it, but all of the rest of you were a part of the process. And all you need to do is do a slight recall or look at your meeting notes to validate what I'm saying. And I just think it's just poor professionalism. One, if you don't know exactly what you're getting into in a site plan, as far as a survey, but it's not like you ran into something that you didn't expect to see. The block of material was always there. It didn't magically appear. There was nothing blocking it from you seeing it, right? And you as a planning board were responsible to make sure that that was correct, right? You could have walked the site at any point in time and you would have seen exactly what you see today, right? Short of the vines that were in the way, or the material that was there, right? The plant material that was there. So I just don't agree. And it's just they're good. And to the last point, we definitely spoke about not being able to receive any water onto our property, and all it has to do is rain, and we have water coming onto the property. So I'd like to know what the mitigation plan is to that, because it's really unacceptable for me to be receiving water from another project, which we didn't receive before. So when is that going to stop? And hopefully it should be, in the near immediate future, meaning this month. And that's what I have to say.
Does the applicant have any response at this time?
Do we say anything? Yeah. We have another neighbor here.
I understand that. I just want to.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
So that we have some coherence.
Sure. Regarding the fence, it's very simple. It costs more to install the type of fence that we're asking for, the rear section, where our residents, who are just people like the rest of us, they just have memory and other dementia issues, and so it's a betterment. It's absolutely a betterment to be able to enjoy the beautiful natural setting behind the property. Very plain and simple.
And I guess my only point to that was that you didn't realize that when you were putting in the site plan?
You need to address the
Absolutely.
board, not each other.
You had no idea.
That's correct. We've since built.
We've
since built 2 facilities, and the light bulb went off. Again, it costs more. It's not like we're trying to save money. Why wouldn't we elect to let our residents see nature versus PVC plastic? So it's a simple improvement for the quality of life for our residents. So I guess I would say that's all I can say about the fence, unless there's questions on that topic. And then relative to the open channel, I won't speak to questions of our honesty, our integrity, but I would say, again, it's not a cost issue. It occurred to me when I heard during one of the previous presentations that there's now a tree fund, or if that was the right term. We would gladly contribute the value of the open channel, regardless of its effectiveness or not, to something like that, a tree fund. So this isn't an attempt to eliminate work or make our lives simple. Very good.
Okay, I don't think we have a mechanism for that yet anyway, but.
We don't have a mechanism for that yet, but that speaks along the line that I was contemplating myself. So perhaps we can think about how such a mechanism might be put into place. That would have to go before the town board, I believe. So it would be simple, but there are mitigations to nearby spots on the Canico River, which this stream is a direct tributary to, that could benefit greatly from an equivalent amount of effort and money. So I would be open to that.
Any other comments from the board at this time?
One other, regarding the fencing. So I understand your point, that, it would be a nicer fence for your clients, for your residents, and, that's great, but these things were, all of these specifications were come to as components of compromises. And so, without compensatory changes, I don't see how you could just, say that it's better for your residents, and that's a good enough reason to change the plan, because compromises were made in getting to that plan to begin with.
Well, I would say, I was not present at the compromise sessions relative to fencing. Max Ferentinos was here, maybe some of you folks remember him. The PVC fence is our default fence, so that's what we use everywhere. So I don't know. I assume that was what our fence starting point versus a concession. I think I'm assuming the PVC fence at the rear of our property it didn't become PVC as a concession. I think that's our boilerplate fence.
Okay, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that was the original plan anyway, and that was what you would agree to, but all of a sudden you've decided to change your mind about it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, the default is still always the PVC fence for privacy, respecting the dignity of the residents.
The
From
dignity
viewing
of the
inside,
residents wasn't a consideration before?
I'm afraid I don't follow you.
I think we weren't asked specifically, we didn't come forward with an open fence and then asked to install privacy, or solid fence, I believe.
Right,
So-
you just said that your default was a solid fence, and you normally would use a solid fence, but all of a sudden you've decided to tell us this would be a better fence. Why wasn't this brought up to us earlier?
Okay, again, two recent projects in the last 18 months or so, we're presented at the rears of those sites, backed up to forest conservation, tree conservation areas. So it became apparent that rather than block the view of trees, of nature for our residents, to, in that portion of our courtyard, make it a metal fence.
We're making this more painful than we need to.
Um,
I'm sorry,
can
I
I
mean,
just-
the metal fence I think is nicer, but we can't not side with the existing residents on this. I mean, I'm speaking for myself.
From a
but
screening, because you
for-
consider
for-
the screening perspective.
Absolutely, for the reasons that they've stated, for the reasons that we stated in the past. I agree with you that the metal fence is nicer, but we decided on this screening purposefully when we passed it originally, and the fact that they're adamant about keeping it, I'm definitely not changing it.
Before we go, any more comments from the board? I understand a member of the public wanted to speak. Yeah.
You should just explain that you bought your house just
Yeah.
after.
Donna?
Hi, Patrick Zimmerman.
So that's why he's never
I'm
here
at
before.
86 Morningside Drive, next door to Donna and Ken, with my wife, Celine, and importantly, my dog, Ruby. None of us...
I don't see Ruby here.
She wasn't able to make it. Well, she's here in spirit. none of us wish to view the daily activities of the residents. Like Don and Ken, we use our entire property. We have plantings, we have a cool pond back into our property. And our dog enjoys it with us. She's going to be yapping. It's not going to be pleasant on your side of the fence. And I think another thing that hasn't been pointed out, your plantings will not be mature from our property side until we're probably gone. I mean, like, beyond being able to enjoy our property. Probably, what, 40 years? We're not going to be there that much. So the solid fence is really important to us, and I think it will prove important to your residents as well. Unfortunately, we weren't here at the beginning of this process because we just moved in February of 2017, so we missed the really fun part, I guess, this planning process. But we're working very hard on our property to keep it clean, natural, eliminate invasive species, introduce natives, and we hope that you guys will side with us at least on the solid fence. We definitely noticed an influx of stormwater, not directly onto our property, but into the tributary and big time in their backyard with the last couple weeks rain events. I think that needs to be addressed. And the fact that they're unable to coordinate with the site at 557 North State Road and deal with the issue of the wall and reinforcement and digging the daylighted portion of the stream, I think it should be unacceptable as well. That's it.
Any other comments from the public at this time? Okay, any comments from the board? Sure. Carol?
Yeah, since I wasn't involved in the process before, I just have a couple of questions. So, as I understand it, that red or orange line, you're allowed basically to build into the buffer area? Is that what that line delineates?
They were permitted to build in the buffer.
Okay. That's one question. And how much of your building kind of goes into the buffer area?
As far as square feet?
Yeah, percentage-wise. I don't mean square feet, just
Oh.
roughly.
It's really,
I'm just seeing if that was part of, I mean, so about, I'd say a third, a little less, you know,
Right.
these
And
two.
okay, and how far is the furthest part of your building to close to, in other words, how close is it to their property line? Where's their property line, and what's the distance?
Oh, at the closest spot?
Yeah. Yeah. This one get the basics down, I'm sorry. The rest of you know this, but I don't. Oh. 37, okay. I've been told it's roughly 37 feet.
Roughly 37.
Okay.
Any other comments from
Can
the
we
board?
agree on the sidewalk?
I'm sorry?
Can we agree on the sidewalk at this point?
The
There's
side-
yeah, in other words, they wanted to remove the sidewalk, that was his first point. There were 3 points that he raised. The first one was removing the sidewalk from the front because of the ramps.
Was there any objection to the sidewalk amendment?
I'm just, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
think there was
trying
any objection to
okay.
the sidewalk
Great,
amendment.
okay.
And we haven't heard any comments from the public on the sidewalk
Right.
amendment either.
No, that's what I'm
Um,
just.
Any other comments from the board at this time? Okay.
If I may, just following up on a suggestion of a possible compensation for the loss of the opening. Could you, not off the top of your head, unless you have it on the top of your head, what would be the approximate value that you could contribute to, say, a stream restoration fund if one were to be made available?
I don't know that the line item that was budgeted, so I don't want to misstate.
Sure. Could you come back to the board with a number?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, could you also, could the applicant also address the issue about the runoff that the public has mentioned several times?
Sure. Yes, I mean, as far as the runoff entering, there is a slope that is not stabilized because the entire site is disturbed currently. Erosion controls are in place. We do weekly erosion control inspections every 7 days as required by the state. So yes, with this wet season that we just endured, there has been water with sediment entering the neighbor's site, I believe, and it's been mentioned that it's been addressed and cleaned up, but until a growing season, we can stabilize the earth, we will just keep maintaining our erosion and sediment controls.
What are those controls?
Silt fence.
Any other comments on the board?
May I please address that from my plant perspective?
Go ahead, Don.
The problem is, probably go to way too many climate change conferences, and these heavy rains are just going to be a normal event. So even planting, if you have a 6-foot slope that ends at a stream and a wetland, and this is newly created for the new planning board member. It was probably always a wetland there, and at some point it got disturbed, but this, they filled in the entire 23-foot distance from my property line to where their fence is that they're discussing right now has been filled in, and it's creating a 6-foot slope from the wetland to the top where that fence will be. That's all fill. So I do understand that when it's planted, it will function much differently. But if we're getting rains and storms that are so unpredictable. So if a storm comes and there's permafrost and we get heavy rains, which is absolutely possible, it's going to run off. If the storm comes following 7 other storms and there's nowhere for that water to go, even with plantings, it's going to run off. So there is absolutely, even after plantings, established plantings, I mean, look at any hills, there is a chance, a really good chance, that there's going to be runoff. So they did address right now during the construction, Preston, who's here, took care of it and did a great job stopping the water coming down at the moment. But that is all hay bales and all kinds of temporary things. And what I want is something on the site plan that's permanent, that when they're done the construction, that there will be no water on my property. I was told not 1 inch of water would ever come on the property, and that needs to be addressed. Like a berm or something. You guys have such amazing equipment, there must be some way to do something. Yeah.
It's all on site and it's all over.
Do you have any comments on this?
Well, you know, the property always had some portion of it that was tributary to the neighbor's property. And now you have, to a large extent, pretty much the rooftop, all the parking areas, the walkways are all controlled by drains that go out into a stormwater system out on North State Road, and a detention system on the property. So the amount of water will be running off a vegetatively stabilized area that, you know, once it's established, should remain so. And these are all issues that were addressed when their stormwater pollution prevention plan was prepared.
How's that possible?
Well,
Because water used to run onto your property.
No, it never did. You have, it flows the other way. The flow from
I
our
mean,
property
unless
onto
the-
that property.
Unless the topo is wrong, I mean, we've heard some apologies about the survey work, but the topography that I'm looking at had water flowing onto your property. Not a lot, but there was a portion of this property that flowed into the channel that's
It
on the
might
property.
be down in the middle, like more towards their property where they might be.
All I'm
down.
saying is that the pre-existing condition was not one where there was zero runoff. And once all the drains are established and the water can run into them, the condition of the site right now, there's 2 drains in the backyard of the facility. That water is gonna be directed into that. That isn't happening right now because none of that stuff is established and the grades are
But
not
it's a
fine.
23-foot wide area. The slope is 6 foot, but it's 20 foot wide, 23 foot wide.
Right, and that was part of the,
Like
as
3.
far as I can tell, that was part of the property that always was tributary to that channel. I mean, some water's gonna get to that channel. I don't wanna represent to you that it's not, but
Well, we were told not one
I
drop.
don't see that there will be anything adverse happening to your property when the site is complete. Not
So you're
right
saying
now.
is that you're not gonna see, we're not gonna see any sediment from their property coming on to the stream or on our property?
It shouldn't be.
But I'm saying,
Well,
what,
let me put it this way, if you get a big storm, you're gonna put sediment on your property. I mean, there's certain times when, you know, even the best stabilized properties, there'll be a little bit of erosion. You know, you get a 100-year storm, all hell breaks loose. So, you know, I don't wanna represent to you that'll never happen, but there just isn't that much water or that much of this property when it's complete that's gonna run onto your property, that's gonna, you know, concentrate to the extent where it's gonna cause erosion.
It's not erosion, it's the introduction of like the muddied water.
It's turbidity.
Well, that's-
It's turbidity.
It's turbidity.
Right,
Because
right,
it's a
but you-
very shallow,
but-
well, except where they bulldozed and that's like a
All right,
little
but-
pond now, but the rest of it is a very shallow ephemeral stream, so.
okay. Without having to refer this matter to code enforcement, just in case there's some problem with the amount of runoff that's coming from one property to another, just in the general course of events, can the applicant consider any ways of mitigating this further, mitigating this runoff issue for in favor of the neighbors?
Yeah, I mean,
Metered construction.
we're kind of in the interim, as Dan says, and just to go back, you know, when we said no drop of water, you know, once the roof drain system is installed and the
We
site is, so,
understand that,
okay.
we understand what the
So,
engineer has just
if
said.
there's,
but
we could
current-
bolster the, you know, we can install temporary erosion control matting on the slope. This way, any water that falls on the slope doesn't erode and pick up any sediment. That's one measure that's used frequently. So the jute mesh, it's like a straw material.
Is that in place right now, or you can add this?
That is not, I'm coming off, you know,
Okay,
I'm
I mean,
thinking of alternatives
I'm
to
not
help
asking you to
bolster.
come up with a complete plan right now, I'm just thinking perhaps you might want to consider this when you're being a good neighbor to the adjacent properties.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board at this time? Any other comments from the public? Okay, any further comments from the staff? No,
You
none?
may want to consider setting a public hearing, so we could act.
Are we far enough along on the submission? Yeah. Okay. Can I ever make a motion to put it on for public hearing?
I make that motion.
Okay, date, which date would you prefer us to have your documents ready?
When's the next?
Next meeting is February 6th.
And we have to get a mailing out?
Sandy, is that doable?
February 20th.
Impossible, or?
It'd be better because
Yeah, we need. I guess we can do it.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can do it for February
Thank you.
6th.
Okay, so we'll have the motion for February
The
6th,
sixth.
opening of the public hearing. Any second?
Second.
Okay, any objections? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Riverno Multifamily Development, 40 Croton Dam Road. Considering the preliminary final environmental impact statement review.
Good evening, I'm Annette Bourne with Stan Schwartz Consulting, representing the applicant Riverno. With us here tonight is the applicant Glenn Betchermile and Wayne Specter, providing legal support. At your last meeting, we received a copy of the comments on the preliminary final environmental impact statement from your town planner and from your planning board attorney. And we had requested that we be able to sit with David and look at possible responses to comments. And by and large, the majority of the comments that were made were fairly easy for us to respond to. There were a few comments that, in our conversations with David, it appeared obvious that we needed input from the planning board in order for us to respond in the way that the planning board would like to be responded to, since this is your document. So we're here tonight to ask your input on how you would like these comments to be responded to. And David, I don't know if you have an idea for how you'd like to go through this, or?
How about one by one?
Well, let me
There are a couple that are related, but whatever.
So I've actually grouped them into 6 different categories, and it might make it easier if we look at those. And starting from...
Wait, before we get into that, have you discussed this grouping and whatever your initial questions are that you have with the staff already?
They're the same comments.
Okay.
Okay, and they're just grouped in like comments. So it comes from the same 17 comments that was in David's memo from January 11th. And I'll give you a for instance. If you look at comment number 5, 6, 17, and 39, those comments refer to requests that we made to departments, the fire department, the police department, the park and recreation department, and the assessor to provide input on potential impacts. We provided, we sent letters, we have a phone log of requests. We received back from the ambulance and from the police department kind of a form letter of what their existing capacity was. It did not include anything having to do with an impact of this project. We have made phone calls requesting information. We were able to contact someone from I think it was the fire department, and when they found out what it is we were requesting, they said they would need to speak with the fire chief and get back to us. They never did. We're not sure what more we can do.
Okay.
Well, I know for one, the fire chief has transitioned over the past 10 days. So if you did something out, I wouldn't be surprised that they kind of sat on it, because there was an outgoing chief and there's an incoming chief, and they probably haven't gotten to it. I can't speak for the other departments.
Are you requesting that we submit an additional letter requesting input?
I would think that would be the right thing to do.
At least for the fire department, because now you understand why they might not address your issue. Yeah, I mean, you could always submit more to the other departments as well. Ellen, you have a comment?
Yeah, but at the same time, can we write a letter asking them to respond?
I believe that the planning board probably can try to assist that process a little bit, at least by requesting the agencies to respond.
The supervisor provided some assistance in that regard, and after her assistance, we received the letters from two of the agencies, two of the departments, that gave us their letters as to what their equipment and staffing, existing staffing conditions were. But it had nothing to do with impacts.
So you're saying that the responses were inadequate for your purposes, is that what you're saying?
Right, and we have included their response in both the DEIS and in the FEIS. If there can be assistance provided to get something more substantive, we'd be happy to include it in the FEIS.
Okay, could you discuss, the more specific requests, if it's necessary to be more clear, with the staff in order to frame a letter to these agencies, and would be happy to try to forward them ourselves to get a response in time, a timely response?
Sure. In the DEIS are copies of the letters in the appendices, and the details in those letters really haven't changed.
Okay, I'm familiar with those, so why don't I work with Sandy to craft a letter to go out to the various agencies from the planning board.
Okay.
One of those departments that you had requested input from, one of the comments was the town assessor. You had requested that we get some additional confirmation of the assessed value of the property, the project. And Mr. Vetramile met with the town assessor, and they discussed modifying the assessed value to be increased from what we had in the DEIS. David, I believe you were going to speak with him. The assessor is, I'm not sure that he would be willing to put that in writing at this point.
Right. I've reached out to him. I haven't heard back, but I'll keep doing that. Try to get something in writing.
Okay, so.
Or at least something that he tells me verifying the assessment that you have in the document.
Okay.
So I can take that on as a responsibility.
The second grouping relates to two comments 45 and 47, which has to do with a comment why the project cannot be geared towards 55 and older. The applicant has provided his response of why he chooses not to make it a 55-year plus project. We request to hear from you what your response, you would like your response to be. We can say in the applicant's opinion, and we can recite it so that it's clear that it's his opinion and not necessarily yours. But we would need to know your opinion on how we should respond to that.
Any other groupings?
I'm sorry?
Continue on with
Oh,
your
okay.
groupings.
These are the easy ones. The zoning inventory, this is questions 22 and 25. What has been requested is that we look at other candidate sites in the town where this particular zoning could be applied. And number one, we are unaware of other sites that would meet the conditions that are included in the special permit, given that we're unaware of properties that have the utilities that would be needed for a property to be eligible for this. We had this discussion as part of the DEIS, and in working with David, we identified a hypothetical property in town without identifying specifically which one it was, and we did an assessment of how it could be applied. I would like to hear from you whether or not you would like to identify properties in town that this zoning could be applied?
We're referring to the zoning, you're talking about the new zoning that we're talking about.
This is the proposed zoning.
Proposed zoning,
Right,
yes.
and so this would be looking at other sites in the town.
What are the other groupings?
The other groupings are, number 23, it is a request that we consider the likelihood that residents from our property, our site, would shop in town. And in order to do that, look at the shopping patterns and the shopping preferences for other projects, the Avalon and the Ginsburg project, and whether or not they're shopping in town. And I'm unaware of how one would go about doing that and the applicability to our project. Am I representing it correctly, David?
That's certainly part of 23. This is something the town board asked for, so that's part of 23.
Okay.
What you just said,
Mm-hmm.
not all of 23.
All right, what are the other questions?
So the school district, and this is the majority of the comments come from the letter from the school district, and it's comments 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42. The school district provided a very lengthy letter having to do with school generation rates, having to do with the taxes and the concerns for overcrowding, and the fact that the additional taxes that will be generated from this project will benefit the taxpayers, but not necessarily the school district, owing to the tax cap. And Mr. Vetromile has met with the school superintendent on several occasions. They have provided enormous amounts of information and explanation for how the complex taxing affects them, and a project like this doesn't necessarily benefit them. We have tried to recite that we understand that it's an issue that we didn't create. It is an issue that it doesn't have anything to do with this project. It has to do with the taxing formula in Albany, and that we're not exactly sure what more we can say. With the addition that we have reflected that Mr. Vetromile has met with the superintendent and has an agreement to provide a contribution of $350,000 to aid in this issue. So all of those comments, the comment was that we were not responsive, and our response for each one of them said, we understand, we accept and don't disagree with what the superintendent is trying to explain. We're not sure what more we can say, but since this is your document, it's really what you want to, how you want to respond.
Okay.
That's a hard one.
It is a hard one because I think in addition to figuring out the taxation questions that you're referring to, it goes a little bit beyond that they're just lacking in physical space. So even though there aren't a ton of kids that are looking to come out of this project, if it were to go forward, there's simply, if you read Ray's letter, there's no space for those kids within the existing walls of the school. So that's part of the reason. And I think that's also one of the reasons that you're getting feedback from the community, from the town board, from us, it's coming, that we need to discuss on the simple population on the site itself. And I know that the town board has asked you about reducing the number of units, and I certainly don't want to see the project go to a place where it's not going to thrive if it were to go forward. but it's something that we need to consider, and possibly part of the answer might be changing the percentages of 1 bedroom versus 2 bedrooms, since the 2 bedrooms are going to be more likely to have school-age children. But it's not just a straight-up taxation question, it's, you know, physical space in the school district at this point. So it's kind of complicated to answer your question.
Can I comment on that?
Please do.
Because I have an opinion, and it's simply my opinion on this based on what I've heard over the years and the information. And I'm a newcomer into this as well, so just please accept this as just a new voice, or because it is your document, and there are ways, you know, obviously they're looking for methodologies to address a very, very complex issue, because the applicant is very much aware of the problems with the school district, which have been stated or not of his doing. The school financing formula that's coming out of Albany, we know is unfair, and we know specifically that it's unfair to Ossining. And there's a big movement within Ossining to try to address that, and you know, that's really the main driver. This is going to.
I think the space is the main driver.
Well, but let's
I
talk.
don't
Let's
disagree with anything you're saying.
But we'll talk about, that's true too. Space is space. I mean, we're talking about the fact that you have a natural growth that's predicted in the school district, irrespective of whether this development is approved or not, that is going to create the need for additional space, irrespective of whether the relatively small number of students are coming into this district or not, because the projections are there. This district is growing. It's one of the few growing districts in the state. There are options. It's not a hard and fast answer to say that that the cap is it's not a hard cap as you see like in some sports. You know, since there is additional funds coming out of this development, which in essence will provide the funds to pay for the education and taxation of these children coming into the district, and because of the way the formula works, that those additional funds are not allocated to pay for the education for these children. They're just going in and reducing the size of the pie, in essence, but not really covering what's being done here. I mean, the option is for the school district to basically override the cap in a situation like this, where you have such an increase in taxable money and taxables that could come into your district, because you could spend the additional funds and not necessarily impact the rest of the town because of the funds coming in. I mean, I granted it's not a politically pleasant option, but it is an option, because I think the way it was presented is we can't do it. And that's just simply not true under the law. I mean, it does take I think a 60% vote in an election to approve the budget, but it is possible to do it. And if it is communicated in such a way correctly that we have new development, and that new development is providing a tremendous amount of additional taxable revenue, but the only way for us to spend it appropriately is to override the cap, then that's an option. Now, whether the school board and the school system elects to utilize that, that's their call. But again, since you're responding to this issue, I think it's appropriate to respond with options that address this very difficult and real problem. So that's, just like I said, my thoughts.
Well, we appreciate, Wayne, your expertise in this matter and your suggestions, but it also indicates, because of the way you described it, it also indicates that the resolution may be beyond what this planning board can do. Were there any other comments that the applicant wants to follow up on these issues?
So those are the comments. We have completed the revisions based on the comments, and would like to submit a revised copy for completeness review as soon as possible. But we can't do that until we get some input as to how you would like us to respond.
Do you have an alternate? Do you have your proposed language on these issues already somehow drafted for these points?
The ones that I just mentioned?
Correct.
No, I have. We have.
You just let them blank without having any
No,
input?
No. We have responses in the preliminary FEIS, And
I think
when
he means subsequent to that, as a result of getting the comments that you received.
No, when we went through them with David, these were the ones that stumped us.
When you say stumped, do you mean you had absolutely no way of writing any draft whatsoever for us to
We
consider?
we have comments, our responses are from the perspective of the applicant, given the best information that we have.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, but.
There's another answer. The answer is, when we sat down with David, we went through as many comments as we could, and we agreed with David, these few questions, we would sit down with you to get direction before we went ahead and wrote it. That's where we ended up.
I see, okay. Does the staff have any comments at this time? Have you had a chance to consider what you might want to discuss in terms of these particular comments?
We really haven't done much since that meeting that we had. So the answer is no.
Okay, Dan, did you have any more comments on this matter?
Again, the outstanding issues that we're still wrestling with really don't fall into my purview, really.
Does the board have any more comments or questions at this particular moment? No? Are there any members of the public here speaking on this? Sir?
Well, my name's John Domidio. I live at 3 Crotondale Road. And he's saying about $300,000. Is this going to be a one-shot deal, or is that yearly?
Applicant, do you have a response to that?
It's $350,000 that
A year?
will be paid. No, it's $350,000 paid up front, in addition to the real estate taxes that come off the project.
Okay, so the $350,000 is just once.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments from the public? Ma'am?
Yeah, I've lived in my house. My name is Elizabeth Maripodi. I live at 1 Hawks Avenue, and I've been there for 45 years. And I've been to other meetings when there was a controversy about our department covering all these new condos and all these new developments in the town outside. I'm right over the line. And I don't know if that's ever been resolved, because they said that they need a new fire department to take care of all of the new residents, new whatever. And then the traffic is just terrible. They put a stop sign at Crotondale and Hawks years ago. When I first moved there was no sign, and then as the condos came in, people run the sign all the time. There's always near accidents in that area all the time. And I'm also at the bottom of the hill, and I'm concerned about when all that land is developed, the runoff of the water coming down the hill and affecting our sewers down. So those are all my concerns. And I benefit from the cap. I'm a senior, and I'm kind of happy about that. So that's my contribution.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing nothing further. Would it help the staff to go and consider these issues some more for providing some type of consultation for the board?
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a concept of how long it might take for that?
Probably until the next meeting anyway.
Okay. Helen, you had a comment? Did you want to say? I thought I heard something.
No.
Any comments from the board?
Nope.
Okay. If we don't make a motion at this point, would it be okay for further consultation between the staff and the applicant on these matters to try to iron out some more difficulties?
That's possible and practical too. You don't need a resolution.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
We can try drafting something up for your review and discussion.
Maybe have a breakout session with
Yeah,
some members of
I
the
was
staff
gonna
and
ask.
the planning board, or just a work session with the whole entire planning board to kind of work through the issues, but maybe a breakout session.
What do you mean by breakout?
Like just have two, we don't have a quorum.
Oh, I
like
see.
staff.
I see. Sure, we could do something like that as well.
Okay.
Sure.
So try to work through the issues maybe with
We
the.
would welcome a work session with the board, a
Yeah.
discussion, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll probably put it on the agenda for just a plain work session, still not hold off on the public hearing, although we'll obviously welcome the public to hear us.
For February 6th?
February 6th?
I'm not I'm out of the country February 6th.
Okay,
Any place good? Can we come with you?
We're going, it's my husband's 70th birthday, and we're going to go back for winter carnival, because he's always wanted to do it.
Go for it. Okay. All right, so when do you think you might iron this out? Maybe the next meeting after that? Or we can,
Well, we can.
Oh, we can work as,
session before.
we can do as much as we can between now and the next meeting and have something hopefully for you for that meeting.
okay.
Is there a special?
Yeah, if I can make one note about stormwater, just to respond to your question and your comment. Right now, there are no stormwater management facilities on the site at all. Stormwater just runs off, and our project would collect, treat, and filter the stormwater, unlike current conditions.
Would the board consider maybe appointing perhaps two board members to attend a meeting? Because it wouldn't be at that point, since you wouldn't have a quorum, it wouldn't be a public meeting at that point. It wouldn't violate the public meetings law. So I was thinking maybe as a committee of the board to meet as well, or is that something that would be considered?
That's something we would consider. I'll let the staff and you work it out and make a possible schedule for that to occur. I'm sure some members of the board might be interested in it.
No, I think that's quite possible. I think we need to put our heads together on this side of the table, perhaps without you guys, to start this thing going, to sort of figure out where the board stands. I think that's what we really need to figure out. That's what you're asking for. Where does the board stand on these things? How do we handle these things?
David, we sat down at a long meeting with you, so I think we're going to end up at the same place. I would really like, if we could, to have a working session with a couple of the board members. It could be any time at your convenience, but I think that would be the most productive at this point.
I don't see that as being the most productive process, but
We'll take it under advisement. That's fine. We'll consider it. We have to obviously consider the scheduling of the board members as well, and of course the staff. The objective obviously is to move this along so that we can at least have some type of public work session that would address some of these points, if we can.
So just in summary, we're going to hear from David. You're going to take the letters from the DEIS and resubmit them to the, and I can send you.
I'm going to use that as a starting point.
Okay.
And try to put a fine point on it, get them on planning board letterhead, get them sent out to the various agencies, the fire department, police department, what's the third one, recreation department.
And the ambulance.
The ambulance, I guess, they did get back, right?
They got back with just the staff that they have.
We can send it to them as well, sure, absolutely.
And then related to that is the assessor.
I'm going to call Ray.
Yeah.
Fernando.
And then you were going to speak with Ray to get some input to share with the planning board.
Right.
We've had a very productive and very positive relationship with the school district, and we want our response to reflect what your opinions are.
And I think we want to find out why Ray was taking issue with the numbers that you had in the DEIS.
Well,
what methodology he's using and why he's taking issue with those numbers.
So the one of the comments that was made had to do with the study that Mr. Sanchez said was being put together by the school district. At the time that we prepared the FEIS, that study was not available, and the comment was for us to please provide the study. We can't provide it if it's not available, and if it does become available, we'll have to look to see whether or not it's an apple to apple. As requested by the planning board, you asked that we do a more comprehensive look at similar projects, not only in this part of Westchester, but throughout Westchester. And so we put together projects from Amerenik, from Tuckahoe, from Ossining, from as many as we could possibly get. And in fact, when you looked at the school generation rates from those like projects, the number of school children that can be expected actually went down. That being said, we we reported our findings, we kept the higher rate that we had put in the DEIS, and we kept that just because we didn't want to provoke more angst about school generation rates. But it is our belief, and it is the data that is clear throughout Westchester, that these projects, these rental projects of this kind is just not generating the school children that some of the condominiums and the townhomes and certainly the single family are generating.
Everyone, I'm confused as to where we're headed. What I think I heard was we're supposed to sit down and frame answers to questions that we don't know what you're thinking, which is what we already did. And questions like inventory sites as to the applicability of the zone or not. I don't know how sitting down with David is necessarily going to advance that. We're just going to frame it in a letter to send to you, and it would seem infinitely more productive if we could sit down with a couple of you and go through this so that we can get past these discrete points.
Well, that may be actually more effective after we've had a chance to meet with the staff ourselves. So it's not out of the question, but at this time we'll leave the scheduling in the future. We just want to move the project along here. We want to bog down specifically what's going to happen in a specific meeting between the applicant and certain members of the board. We're just sort of like, it would be kind of pointless at this stage.
I think the board needs an opportunity to digest what they
frame
heard
it.
tonight.
Right.
And then work through the issues. So, I mean, probably the best thing would be a work session again of the board to because they heard what you said tonight and they can consider it. But.
Okay. All right.
So can we hope to be on your, is it February 6th meeting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would probably be a work session. Yeah.
Okay. And we're anxious to wrap this up. Everything else is finished. So
We're not eager to hear you appear before us again either. So that's not really the issue.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask, is February 6th going to be a public speaking again? Because there's nobody here from our neighborhood. I'm going to, we have a phone thing going around. This place would have been packed tonight if I know we could have talked.
During a work session,
I mean, are you giving us special permission to talk tonight, or we weren't
yeah,
allowed?
well, because you're only a few people
Okay,
here.
no, I understand that.
So there's always a time limitation in terms of that, but if, obviously if there's enough interest for the public, Sandy will arrange a larger venue and things like that.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I just say something? I've lived in that area for so long, and I never received any notice that this was gonna even go forward. Don't they have petitions and things like that for people in the area of such a big project?
This is not currently in a public hearing status, right? Correct.
There
you wanna
was a
explain it?
public
Yeah.
hearing on the DEIS, which the public had an opportunity to make the comments, and now this is the applicant replying to those
So there was
comments.
in other words, if you're living in the area and you don't really want to see this happen, don't you have the right to know that this is going to happen? Or
There was a public
Maybe emails,
hearing.
the emails.
We had-
It was in
Also
the newspapers, and there were signs in front of the property stating the dates of the public hearings.
Notices were mailed for the public hearing.
Yeah, they
Those were done.
Public hearing on that.
We have to, by law, we have to do that.
But it's
We
only,
did.
but public mailings are only within a certain distance from the property.
Okay, thank you very much. If you need me to.
Okay,
I'm sorry, your
next
name?
item on the agenda are minutes. Have you had a chance to take a look at the minutes? Draft minutes?
Yeah.
Any comments on the draft minutes? Let's start with the first one from December 5th.
December 5th.
Any comments on the board on it? Can I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
No objections? So minutes from December 5th are approved. Anybody had a chance to read the December 19th minutes? Oops, they were. Any motion to accept it?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, any objections? Okay, none, so December 19th minutes are approved. Okay, we already have the schedule for February 6th. Oh, what is the environmental club students out presenting?
That is, the supervisor asked if we could put that on our meeting agenda.
I have no objections, but I was just wondering what they were planning to present us with.
So the first, I guess they have a presentation related to the river keepers.
Any thoughts? Anybody know what this is for? Okay. Well, we have no objections to hearing from members of the...
The supervisor asked if we could put it on that agenda, and maybe give them the first hour or half hour. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What they need. I'm sorry? But the town board.
An hour.
They'd like to attend also.
Okay, but
So-
is this a matter that requires us to react to, or is it just a simple presentation?
No, it's just a
by them?
presentation.
Okay, very
So
good.
why are we doing this at the town board meeting?
Yeah, where we can go.
Well, if you think we should do it at a different date.
Well, the problem is that we may
We
be
have a fair
having...
amount on that agenda.
I know. But
Is it for the 6th?
No, the
it
20th.
was
Oh,
for
the
the
20th.
20th.
Oh,
No, you don't have an excuse.
I don't, I'll keep it.
Okay, because otherwise we might be having a large public meeting by that time because some of these other matters, right, on the 20th.
Do you want to try to move it into March, maybe?
That's why I was wondering what the presentation is about, you know, maybe it can be moved, maybe it cannot be moved.
European.
But we have no idea what it is. Okay.
Yeah, I was
Ice
just
skating.
asked to put it on today.
All right, yeah, if you could find out a little bit more about what they are, and what they're planning to do, because it may not work well with the other matters that we already have coming up on the agenda.
Okay.
And how much time they might need.
Yeah.
So we're not rushing.
Right, well, I was thinking an hour.
But we might want to fully appreciate their presentation.
Right.
an hour.
Well,
An hour?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I don't think I'm just a messenger.
Well, we'll leave her, we'll wait for further information on that
I
matter.
have two high school kids, the last thing that I might need is to listen to high school kids for an hour.
All right, well,
Okay,
we'll
but putting
read
that aside, can I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn,
Okay.
please.
and then we'll.
So let's wait a minute,
We'll look
there's
into
any
that.
other matters? No, okay.
No.
Motion, you seconded, any objections? Okay, thank you.